Hello and welcome. I'm Jenny Hall. Thanks for joining me for technique number 3 in my technique journal. Today we're going to explore the mirror image technique. There will be 2 methods in achieving this technique, and you should have all of the supplies in your craft room. I've also used the sample to make a finished card, which we'll check that out as well. The first method is to stamp the image onto a large block. That would be an acrylic block. Here is what the finished technique will look like, and it's an exact mirror image. So let's start out by using a very large acrylic block, something that is more than big enough to accommodate the image size. Carefully place an inked up stamped image on that block. You can see it here. Don't take the block to the paper, take the paper to the block. Be sure to place the image where you're going to want it to appear on your cardstock or your piece of paper. Apply gentle pressure and the ink transfers right over to the paper. And then you need to add another stamped image, regular stamps, and there you go. Method number 2 uses, instead of the acrylic block, uses a silicone mat in exactly the same fashion. I used the first stamp that had words so that you could see that the words will appear backwards. So with this technique, it is best to avoid any stamps that contain any words. I am inking up a stamp. Make sure your ink pad is nice and wet. Place it on, stamp it down to the silicone mat, and then place your cardstock over it just like we did with the previous method. And the ink transfers over to the cardstock. Be sure to use really good cardstock and you will get a better transfer of your image. I'm using dye ink today, but you could experiment with many different ways. And here we have a finished result of an exact mirror image. So here's a project that I created using this method and with the little birds. And I did a tiny experiment here. I stamped Versamark clear sticky ink onto the silicone mat, and I'm now adding a card base, and look at the nice, very subtle background image it creates. And I'm going to stamp the same image on the opposite side of the paper, and now we have that exact mirror image. Very cool, isn't it? Think about all of the wonderful possibilities you can come up with this fun technique. Now I'm going to color in the birds. I want to give them an ombre look of orange, so it will be a dark orange at the bottom, and then it will fade up to a very light orange at the top of the bird. I'm coloring the birds in exactly the same way on each bird. I like to color with colored pencils because it allows me to have a very finite control over where the color is placed. Here's a tip about colored pencils. Be sure that your pencil ends are very, very sharp and pointy, and you will get a really nice control over where that color lands and all of the pencil marks that you create. I'm going to use an aqua painter at the very, very bottom of where that brown and orange met, and that way it will blend out some of the brown and keep the orange shadow look. To keep this image as one piece, then I fussy cut it, and the little bitty white place I'm coloring in with an old olive pencil because it matches the card base and will not show up. So here's where we can take this card and give it some customization. We've got 2 exact mirror images that we're working with. That would be the card base with the stamped background, and now the bird. So that is building up on the design principle of symmetry. Let's take symmetry just a little further, and we're going to give a sentiment that has a very symmetrical look. So let's create the sentiment and have a little bit more pizzazz onto the birds. So I rubbed the back of the birds onto the Versamark pad while I was heat embossing this sentiment, and that's going to give some gold gilding on the back wings and tail feathers of the bird. I really like the look that it gave them. Building upon the symmetry of the mirror image, then I have created a brown die cut that matches exactly the sentiment from white, and I've cut it apart and spread it out a bit, and that's going to further build on the symmetry. So this technique today with mirror image is not all about symmetry, but it more or less is, because we want something to be symmetrical from the left to the right or from the top to the bottom. That is the basis of reflection and keeping the images exactly the same. So the sentiment is this, the die cut is exactly the same on the left side and the right side. The bird is the same on the left side and the right side. The card-based background has the design on the background exactly the same. So we can kind of build on it from there. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you've enjoyed this technique, and I would love to see what you create with it.
Thanks for watching the video. See you next time.